Welcome to episode 59 of the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Tirapelli, bariatric sports dietitian. Today, I wanted to spend time answering your questions about nutrition for endurance training for bariatric athletes. I work with many endurance athletes who are training for events like 5Ks, 10Ks, half or full marathons, cycling events, triathlons, and even long distance hiking. I get a lot of questions around how to fuel for these types of events after bariatric surgery, since they generally require more carbohydrates and overall energy intake. And it can be really confusing with all the information that's out there in social media for exactly what a bariatric endurance athlete really needs. So a few weeks back, I posted on my Instagram stories a question box regarding any questions that you might have about nutrition for endurance training, and I have included those questions today. So let's dive in. So first question, should I be eating before a run? I typically only eat afterwards. So to optimize your training run, lift, HIIT workout, the short answer is yes. Carbohydrates are what fuel our muscles and become very important as the duration of your running or your training sessions increase. This goes for any type of activity, like I mentioned. So whether it's a lifting workout, a HIIT workout, swimming, cycling, whatever it might be. Now, if you're working out early in the morning, because this is a common question, like, hey, I get up early and the only time I have to work out is I got to get up and go. Even something as small as a few bites of banana, applesauce pouch, toast, cereal, graham crackers, pretzels, granola bar, fruit snacks can really help to prolong your time to fatigue during a workout. And this is going to lead to better overall results and performance. So again, if you have goals, you're trying to lift heavier or you're trying to, improve your time and PR in maybe a race, or just overall try to, be more efficient in your training, fueling is important, and incorporating a little bit more carbohydrate, even in very small amounts, can be really beneficial. So I always just remind folks, remember, you're going to be different than someone else, right? And the amount of carbohydrate that you need or that you tolerate is going to be completely individualized to you. So we have to figure out what that is. Now, depending upon the time that you have before you begin your workout will determine the volume of food to take in and also the type of foods to focus on. So here's the rule of thumb that I teach my folks. If you are within an hour, so you're under an hour until you're going to start movement, okay, you're going to go to the gym or you're going to start your run, you want to aim for 15 to 30 grams of quick digestible carbohydrates, such as the ones I just mentioned. So again, like the pretzels, the applesauce, the banana, toast, etc., because these are going to be easy to digest and available and taken into the bloodstream and distributed to your muscles more quickly than more complex carbohydrates. So, for example, we want to avoid or limit the intake of foods that are high in fat, fiber, and even a big blast of protein right before, for example, an endurance workout can really delay the digestion and absorption of those nutrients. And they can feel like they're sitting heavy in your pouch. And that sometimes for folks can lead to feelings of, bloating, cramping, nausea, and even in, worst case, some diarrhea during the workout. So in that immediate pre-workout window, you really want to focus on a small amount of quick and easy to digest carbohydrates. Now, when you have a longer period of time before the workout's going to begin, so for example, if you have at least 2 hours or more, this is where you can eat a more balanced meal that includes carbohydrates, and that can be simple or complex carbohydrates paired with protein and even small amounts of fat or fiber, depending upon your tolerance. So this can also help you to feel less hungry during runs or during longer training sessions. And you can get used to this by practicing, eating this way during your training program. Because something you'll hear me say lots of times today is you never, ever want to try anything new on race day. So all the things that we're talking about today should be baked in, meaning during your training, you should be practicing, eating on a consistent schedule. If we're going to incorporate, quicker, easy to digest carbs in that window before the workout starts, that 1 hour, we want to practice that. And this is the time to do it, is during training. All right. So next question. At what time or distance should I begin carrying fueling with me to have on my runs? This is a great question. So intra-run fueling is determined by the duration of your workout. So how long you're going to be moving your body for. This becomes key when you plan to be running of at least 60 to 90 minutes or more. So intra-run fueling becomes important for movement that's lasting 60 to 90 minutes or longer. Okay. This is where replenishing carbohydrates, electrolytes, and fluids become critical to allow you to continue with sustained energy levels to optimize your performance and delay the onset of fatigue. So, the rule of thumb for endurance activity of at least 60 to 90 minutes in duration is aiming for 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So if you will be running for 2 hours or more, you could benefit from increasing your carbohydrates even further. But for a bariatric athlete, this is very difficult and most often unrealistic. Okay. So this is where I see confusion that comes in. So I'll get someone that's like, hey, I started running and I read online somewhere that I should be eating, 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Yes, that is absolutely what the research suggests is beneficial to optimize performance. But for someone that's had bariatric surgery, that's going to be very, very challenging. And so I would say that 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour is generally pretty doable for most folks. It will take some practice and gut training, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment, but it can be done. And what you fuel with, again, is going to be very individualized with how do we meet those goals with different types of products. Now, the only other time where, fueling and getting in those carbohydrates and fluids and electrolytes can be helpful is when your workout is, if it's less than an hour, but it's in a very hot or humid environment, or it's going to be very high intensity. This is where you may benefit and feel better with specifically a pre-workout carbohydrate, but you may even benefit from carrying with you some fluids that have carbohydrates and electrolytes that you can just sip on throughout the workout, even if it's less than an hour. Again, in those kind of intense situations of hot or humid environment or a very hard workout. So that would be a kind of an exception to the rule of, okay, well, my workout's not 60 to 90 minutes, but it's going to be super hot and humid out, and I'm doing this in a very intense, this is an intense workout. That's where those carbs and electrolytes may also help you to feel better in that type of a workout. Third question, how often during a run should I be fueling with, and with what? Great question. Get that one a lot too. So there are many ways that we can go about fueling during long runs, lasting longer than 60 minutes. So first, I teach my clients to be fueling early and often. So when I have an endurance athlete and, some of the things that they've tried in the past, and this is one kind of red flag that I always go, we got to address that, is they wait too long to begin fueling on their runs. So basically they wait until the onset of feeling tired before they start sipping on their fluids or taking their gels or their products that they purchased or carried with them. So I teach my athletes to fuel early and often. That means we're having a pre-workout, meal or snack, depending upon the time of the start of the race or the run. And then you're going to start fueling within the first 30 to 45 minutes of your run. And then we'll likely need to aim for taking in carbs at least about every 30 minutes throughout the duration of your event. Now, again, we will need to alternate between, what you're eating and drinking, because again, as a bariatric athlete, most of the times, eating and drinking together doesn't work well. And so in the runs, we have to work on alternating that and then figuring out, how am I going to remember to do this? So I have had athletes that have fueled by time, or they have fueled by mileage. So for example, I've had people that will write on their arms, like at, 10 minutes, at 20 minutes, at 30 minutes, and what they're drinking or eating. Or I've had people that will alternate by mile markers, whether it's fueling with their gel or they're sipping on their fluids. So again, this is all things that we would work through together and sort out for you so that you know what works best for you. Now, what are we fueling with? What is intra-run fueling? What should we be taking with us? Okay. So main three things that, you should be focused on when you are an endurance athlete: carbohydrates, electrolytes, and fluids. Those are the main three things that we're going to be focused on during long duration training sessions or races. So let's start with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates can come in the form of sports drinks, gels, goos, chews, bars, or even for those folks that don't tolerate sports nutrition products that have carbs, I will have folks that use whole food products. So for example, pretzels, dates, dried fruit, dry cereal, graham crackers. I had someone recently try a Pop-Tart. It's really, again, the sky's the limit, and there is no one way that fits all. So we have to figure out what you tolerate. This takes practice. I've had people that don't like the consistency of certain gels, so they are looking for a thinner consistency, or someone might want a thicker consistency to start, but as the race goes on, a thinner. And so there are tons of different choices out there. Now, most gels and chews will contain about 20 to 25 grams of carbohydrate per serving. So this means for us to hit that 30 to 60 grams per hour, most people will need at least 1.5, let's call 1 to 2, right, per hour to meet those carbohydrate goals. Now, again, if it's not a gel or it's chews or shot blocks or, whole foods, then we would need to adjust the portion to get us towards that 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So we have to figure out what works best for you. The next thing that we focus on for, our long training sessions is going to be electrolytes. Now, sodium is the primary electrolyte lost in sweat. Therefore, this is what the main focus should be for electrolyte products, okay? In fact, some symptoms that I hear from my, endurance athletes that they experience during longer runs, for example, headaches, nausea, GI issues like bloating, cramping, diarrhea, dizziness, can be from too low of sodium intake. And that oftentimes can just be because they didn't know that the gels and the goos they're taking in don't have much, electrolytes or sodium, or they're overhydrating, which can lead to a dangerous situation called hyponatremia, which actually suppresses your sodium. And so that can be a situation that's dangerous. So we really have to focus on, okay, what products am I consuming throughout the duration of this event? How many grams of carbohydrate? And also, do these products supply me with adequate, electrolytes, primarily sodium? So I always tell folks, when we're working together, let's take a look at the gels or the goos or whatever it is that you're going to carry with you, and let's take a look at the sodium content. Okay, because you need to make sure we're getting it one way or another. Okay, so besides carbs, we're looking at getting in our electrolytes and then our fluids. So other electrolytes just that, folks will ask me about is, well, should I be having, other electrolytes? What about these products that have, high amounts of potassium or magnesium, chloride, calcium? These are the other electrolytes that we are losing in our sweat, and you'll find them oftentimes in electrolyte packets. But again, I want to reiterate, the most important electrolyte lost in sweat is going to be sodium. The rule of thumb is at minimum 250 to 300 milligrams and up to 500 to 700 milligrams of sodium per hour or more. Now, I say or more because there are situations where if you are a salty sweater, meaning if you come home from workouts and you have you feel like a grime like on your face or like your arms or your chest, or take a look at the brim of your hat. If you wear hats when you run or work out or cycle, if you have a white mark on the brim of your cap, that means you're losing salt. And you might be a salty sweater, meaning you're losing an even higher concentration of sodium in your sweat, and therefore you would benefit from products that have a higher sodium content. So again, this would be something that we would want to take a look at, understand, what you are losing, and we can then select items that'll have a higher concentration of sodium so that you can get through those workouts. And then lastly, fluids. The typical rule of thumb is at least 4 to 6 ounces about every 15 to 20 minutes to reach about 16 to 24 ounces of fluid per hour. Now, again, your sweat rate is going to tell us, is going to be an important factor to consider on whether this amount is adequate for you, right? So things that impact your sweat rate, your hydration status. If you're dehydrated coming into your run, you're not going to sweat as much, which means you're not going to cool as well. Your core temperature is not going to cool and you will fatigue sooner. So coming into your training sessions hydrated is important. And then having that strategy of sipping about every 15 to 20 minutes. And I always just use the rule of thumb of 1 ounce is about a gulp of fluid. Okay. So if you're just trying to figure that out, or better yet, carry a fluid bottle that you know exactly how much is in the bottle. That way you can make sure that you're aiming for the right amount per hour of movement. Of course, hot and humid environments can also increase your sweat rate, which means in those situations, you may need more fluids than that recommendation. So tons of different factors to consider. But again, we can look at that for each race, the time of year that we're in, your location that you're going to be, running this in or your training sessions are in, and we can always adjust. After a workout, if you're kind of curious, like how much am I losing? Track during the workout how much fluid you're sipping, that you're drinking, okay? And before you begin the run, take a check on the scale. How much am I weighing before and after my workout? And for every 1 pound lost, you should be rehydrating with 16 to 24 ounces after the workout. And that's in addition to just your day-to-day, fluid goals. So for every 1 pound lost, we want to rehydrate with 16 to 24 ounces of fluid. And I'll just kind of close this out with, remember, sports drinks are helpful because, they can help with meeting your fluid, electrolyte, and carb goals. So they can be great to carry with you. You can do a handheld fluid bottle holder. You can do the hip packs. There's so many different ways to carry this. And I just wanted to mention that because I get a lot of folks that, sports drinks, what do you mean? It's just sugar. Your body needs it. It's okay. So during these long training sessions, sports drinks are combining carbs, fluids, and electrolytes in one nice little package. So they can be, a helpful option and generally are well tolerated. And you can even work on diluting it if it's a sweeter flavor and you need to dilute it a little bit. That's okay. We just want to make sure that you're getting in adequate, amounts of carbs and electrolytes and fluids during those long training sessions. Okay, next question. How do people do gels or high carb snacks without a protein in post-bariatric life without dumping? Great question. So again, this is going to be so highly individualized, right? Depending upon the type of surgery you had. So if you have a Roux-en-Y or duodenal switch, which is a much more, malabsorptive procedure versus a sleeve, your tolerance of, the different sports nutrition products or the amount of carbohydrate that you can tolerate at one time is going to be so individualized. So it's hard for me to just give a straight answer across the board because again, every one of you listening will have a different tolerance to carbs. But where I see the most issues, generally speaking, are the more concentrated a product is in carbohydrates, so meaning the amount of carbs per serving, or even the types of sugars that are contained in them are going to determine, your tolerance. So it's, again, critical that we practice and we figure out what you like, the taste-wise, consistency, the amount and timing throughout long runs, how much you can tolerate at one time for carbs is going to be really important, right? So we got to sort that out. And I do have some people that just are like, look, I can't do gels and goos. I just can't do them. And that's okay. We can focus on whole food carbohydrates as well that you can carry along. So think pretzels, graham crackers, dry cereal, dried fruit, honey. I've had people do all different types of things during their runs or training sessions that can provide you with carbs that come in a more whole food form that are generally better tolerated. So figuring that out is going to be something that you want to put into practice during training. So another question I got, and it kind of ties into what I just finished saying, is what is gut training? Have you heard this before? Someone saying, well, you'll do better if you do some gut training during your endurance, training program. So gut training refers to the process of training the digestive system to tolerate and absorb nutrients, specifically carbohydrates during exercise. This can help you to avoid or limit GI issues during longer training sessions. And this is important because during prolonged activity, the body diverts blood away from the digestive system to the muscles. And this makes digestion and absorption more challenging. And this can be increased further for a bariatric athlete, specifically someone that's had like a Roux-en-Y, because now you have less intestinal tract to process and digest these nutrients, right? So you might be even more, sensitive. So how do we practice gut training? Like, how do we put this into play? Well, as I mentioned in the previous questions, not everyone will be able to, right out of the gate, hit 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate in an hour or, eat something before a run. It's going to be something that you have to practice and gradually increase over time. So notice I said gradual. You don't want to just right out of the gate go, okay, Kim said 30 grams. Let me take down these 2 gels. And then you're suffering, right? You're not feeling good. So again, we always meet, where you're at with in terms of what you're currently doing. What's your current practices? What are you currently taking in before a workout, day to day, as well as during longer training sessions, what you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't. And we start building from there. because gut training can take time, guys. This should not be something that you're like, okay, let me try this new product 2 weeks before the run to see if it works. Or I've never fueled on long runs. Let me start practicing this now with a week to go. No, it can take upwards of 6 to 8 weeks or longer to really fully train your intestinal tract to tolerate more carbohydrates. And as we've talked about with endurance training, you will likely feel better and have better performance if you are able to tolerate more carbohydrates. So this is going to take some time to really, work on. And the whole goal of this is to enhance the intestinal tract's ability to absorb and oxidize carbohydrates more efficiently during exercise. So again, this is going to mean experimenting with different foods, products, drinks. It may mean testing out different products that contain different types of sugars, glucose, fructose, maltodextrin. The brand UCAN uses a super starch that is a more complex carbohydrate. Some bariatric athletes tolerate it very, very well because it doesn't kind of provide a quick blast. It's a more kind of prolonged, sustained carbohydrate release. And I've had some athletes that don't tolerate it. They don't like the flavor of it, whatever it might be. So we have to figure out, what products work for you, also testing out different timing and amounts. So for example, again, this is specific to a bariatric endurance athlete. You may benefit from fueling in smaller portions every, say, 15 to 20 minutes rather than just doing it once every 30 minutes, right? Because for you, maybe you can tolerate half of a gel at a time, okay? But taking in a whole gel every 30 minutes, it's like, no way, that's too much, right? So again, these are all things that we have to figure out and practice during training. We never, ever, ever want to do anything new on race day. Okay. So we want to work on this, focusing on what amount of carbohydrates you can tolerate at a time, the types, the products, etc. How you're going to carry them on race day as well is something to think about in your training program. Okay. Another question. Do you eat the same on running versus non-running days? Awesome. Love this. In fact, I'm going to do another episode on this topic. So this gets into the concept of nutrition periodization, okay? Nutrition periodization is matching your nutritional intake to your movement or training goals, all right? Now, as we go throughout a year, those training cycles are going to change. For the most part, most people don't do the same thing all year long, right? And in fact, I wouldn't recommend you do that. Most of the time, you're going to have, higher training cycles with different goals versus lower training cycles with different goals, right? So during a higher mileage training cycle, for example, if you're training for a specific race, like, a half marathon, full marathon, and you're going to be moving for at least 60 to 90 minutes on most, sessions, you will likely need more carbohydrates day to day, as well as in the build up to race day. Okay, more carbohydrates will be important. Now, on days or cycles where you're going to be in a lower, movement or training cycle, lower mileage, etc., you won't need as many carbohydrates. So it just really depends on the cycle that you're in, your goals, with what you're doing, to understand, like, do I need more or less carbs? Now, again, I'll just highlight, again, in a higher training cycle, even on lower training days, you still want to make sure you're incorporating carbohydrates because that's important for recovery to restore those muscle glycogen, stores that are in the muscle, which is just carbohydrates stored in the muscle. If you're only eating carbs on the race day or the run days, I promise you're not going to recover as well. So again, in bigger, training cycles, higher mileage training cycles, day-to-day carbohydrate consistency, whether you're in a recovery day or an actual training day, will be consistent. Okay. When you're in maybe a body composition phase or you're in a lower, cardio type of phase, we can look at reducing overall carbohydrates. So we can certainly make those adjustments based on what you're doing. Now, on my Instagram page, I actually have these Active Bariatric Nutrition plates that I created, and they're visual aids to show you how to adjust your intake based on your training. So I also talked about this on episode 43 of this podcast, so please go back and listen to that one. I specifically chatted about, how to adjust nutrition based on your goals. Are you someone that likes to track calories and macros versus using these training plates as a guide to adjusting your intake to meet your needs. So go check that out because they're a good visual aid. I have them pinned right at the top of my Instagram, grid, whatever you want to call it. And I have specific information in episode 43 about those plates and how to adjust your carbohydrates, proteins, fats, etc., based on your training cycle that you're in. So go check that out. Okay. And of course, message me if you have any further questions about that. Now, how do I get in enough carbs with limited stomach space, especially when increasing miles? Great question. So for most bariatric individuals, this is going to take a lot of pre-planning. It's going to take some meal prepping. And it's most likely when I'm working with my individual clients, it's going to, take, okay, what are our overall calorie or macronutrient goals? How are we going to distribute those throughout the day at meals and snacks based on the volume that you can tolerate to meet these goals? And again, as I mentioned earlier, we may have these set, calorie or macro goals, but you may not be able to reach those right out of the gate. And that's okay. This is all a gradual process of building up so that we're optimizing your nutritional intake to best fuel you for whatever these, training sessions and races, et cetera, that you're doing. So I just wanted to, highlight that even with limited space, it might be important that we start where we're at, and then we might have to add in some snacks, right? We might just, need more than just the 3 meals to meet the protein, carbohydrate, fat, etc. So oftentimes for folks that are moving more, a more frequent style of eating can be beneficial to help you meet your overall energy goals. So keep that in mind. So for example, I don't want to give out like, you need this X amount of carbs, because again, every one of you listening has different calorie, carbohydrate, protein, fat goals, right? Because every one of you is different. But in general, for someone that is in a higher training cycle, we're going to look at making sure we're incorporating, fruits, vegetables, or whole grains at each meal with your protein, and then trying to fit in additional maybe carbohydrates at snacks as well. That's kind of how we will target how to get in more over time. And again, this can be a gradual buildup. And I'll just also finish by saying, folks, for those of you listening that are earlier out and your restriction is much stronger, this is not easy. Okay. And it might mean that we have to adjust the intensity of your workouts because you just can't tolerate it. And so you have to work with where you're at, and that's okay. So we have to figure out how much you can tolerate in a day, how we can best distribute that throughout each day and week to help you meet your goals. So that is it. I hope you found today's information helpful. And I also wanted to let you know that I have a free resource on my website all about how to fuel your workouts. So if you are interested in that free resource, you can go to my website, activebariatricnutrition.com/resources, and you can download that free resource there. And it talks about, how to eat pre-workout depending upon how much time you have, different options for intra-run fueling or intra-workout fueling, different, carbohydrate-containing products, as well as whole food options and their, energy info, so calories, sodium, carbohydrates, etc. per product, and then also recovery nutrition and how to focus on that to optimize, putting nutrition back into your body so that you can do this again the following day. So go check it out on my website, activebariatricnutrition.com/resources, and let me know if it's a helpful resource for you. And then I'll just also say, if you're confused or you just have no idea how to begin fueling for more activity, please reach out. This is exactly what I do with my one-to-one clients that I work with. That's what my entire practice is about, is helping you to fuel these new exciting goals that you have. And I know that there's so much, confusing and, misleading information that's out there, whether it's straight sports nutrition guidelines or it's you can only ever eat the straight bariatric nutrition guidelines. How do we blend those two to help you to meet your goals? I would love to help you with that. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. You can always email me, kim@activebariatric.com. You can message me on my Instagram, Active Bariatric, or you can even schedule a free discovery call by going to activebariatricnutrition.com/discovery. And you can schedule an appointment there and we can chat about what you're doing and the questions that you have so that I can get you started on, a new set of, eating recommendations. So we can always do that. So to close out today, I'll just say you can watch the full video of this podcast on my YouTube channel, the Active Bariatric Nutrition channel. So make sure to subscribe to it, give it a like. And then also, if you wouldn't mind, guys, I would so appreciate if you would share this podcast with at least one person that you think would find this helpful. Because the whole goal of this, podcast, as I have said all along, is to spread the word about evidence-backed information for active bariatric individuals so that you have an understanding of how to adapt your nutrition over time as you change your movement and training goals. So if you don't mind sharing this, I would so appreciate it. And also giving it a review. That's how it kind of gets out in front of more people. And I would just so greatly, greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on my social media pages on Instagram at Active Bariatric, as well as on my Facebook community and my TikTok channels. And then lastly, if you'd like to learn more about my one-to-one bariatric nutrition coaching services, you can go to my website, activebariatricnutrition.com, and schedule a free discovery call so we can learn more about each other. So thanks for tuning in. I have some awesome guests coming up in the next few weeks, so please keep tuning in. I think you'll find them really helpful. Appreciate you being here. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care.